First of all, we know who you are, but why don't you say on video who you are? What's your name? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm Andrew Drake. I currently live in the St. Louis area. I used to intern at Current, so I don't know how many of you remember this bald face or not, but me and Chris go way back, so I went down there a couple times, interned a couple times, so I'm familiar with Current, if you're not familiar with me, but that's who I am. I wrote a book about being sad and lonely, so I am the expert on singleness. So
Awesome. Okay.
I'm not asking that. Okay, Tina recently heard a quote in a sermon that said, "Singleness should be your ultimate relationship goal." What are your thoughts about that?
singleness should be your only relationship goal? Ultimate
relationship goal.
Well, my first thought is I have no idea what that means. Like, is that person just advocating that everyone's single? Because if that's the case, like, there's going to be no more humans in like 20 years.
Let me give you some context. It was a sermon in an 8-week relationship series, but I believe it was one of the first ones that was specifically about singleness. And he was talking about how we maybe make too big of a deal out of the need to find a relationship. And we like hold marriage up to a very high, like, you know, in a high status. And then oftentimes we act like singleness is an issue or a problem. But he was talking about how really scripturally that's not what it says. That singleness is really the ultimate goal, but marriage is good too. Marriage is good, but really singleness would be our ultimate goal.
And then you also said something about like, I'm not going to say this well, but you said something about how marriage is like a manifestation of your singleness.
The other quote. Okay. His other quote was, marriage does not complete your singleness, but it exposes it. So if we're not like healthy and whole and purposeful in our singleness, then we're going to just marry another person who's just as broken as we are, and it exposes all the issues. Whereas if we are each functioning as whole, healthy individuals in our living out our purpose for God, then when we come together, it's much more powerful and healthy and holy.
Right. Yeah. So in that sense, saying that like you need to be working on yourself and be able to do that competently as a person and not expect someone else to come in and just like save you or do all the work. In that sense, singleness is the goal. I can agree with that. Yeah. Because I think there is, as someone who is single, who has been single for 26 years, I can't speak to what's on the other side of that. Right. But I can relate to the feeling of the grass is greener, thinking, well, if I just get this, then all of the loneliness, all of the discontentment, all of the depression I feel will be cured in this one thing, when in reality, a lot of that stuff goes beyond just singleness, and it's a life issue in general. And there is no quick fix to any of those things you experience or feel. So I guess in that sense, I would agree, but I wouldn't phrase it like that. That's weird. Because if you told high school Andrew that singleness is the goal, I'd be like, no, because it is. I am living it right now, and it does not feel like a goal.
Right. So I don't want anything to do with that. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, you mentioned your book, so we know that you are now a published author, and as you said, an expert in singleness.
An expert.
Your book was so popular that we were fighting over it in the office the other day.
Oh, nice.
To have a chance to read that. I never did get that back from anyone, so I haven't read it. You want to tell us a little bit about the book and some of the insights that are in it? And then later we can ask you more questions about that.
Yeah.
Any
I
hi-
wrote, yeah. So a couple years ago, actually, in fact, when I was doing a residency at Current, I had the idea for the book, and I woke up one morning and I was 24 years old. I had a receding hairline, which now is just no hairline. Uh, I was, an unpaid intern in my mid 20s, and I was like, this can't be everything. Like there has to be more to life than just being single, balding, and not having like a full-time job. And I took all of that, like, instead of being bitter about that and like weeping or like, I don't know, eating a ton of ice cream, I was like, what if I take all of these feelings I'm feeling and put them into something? And so all those feelings kind of turned into this. And it's a book about what it's like to be single your whole life. But really, it's a book about coming to terms with your insecurities and the parts of your life you're kind of dissatisfied with, and coming to see how actually those parts of your life make your life story worth telling and interesting and worth listening to. And when you look at your dissatisfactions that way, you can kind of come to grips with them better than just being bitter about them. And so that's what the book is about.
All right. So a little bit about what we were talking about with that quote. Like you decided there are some things in myself that I can focus on or work on or use for good.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So, what have been some of your biggest struggles in your singleness?
Biggest struggles in singleness. Um, I'll break it. This isn't really something I think about in those terms, but I'll break it up into two. I'll say, I mean, this is for students, right? And so if I think back to when I was a junior high or high school student, I'd say a lot of my struggles with being single was this sense of missing out. And I feel like a lot of the pains of being single when you're in school is, well, I see my friends with relationships, or I see so and so person with a relationship, and they're flirting and holding hands and who knows what else, and you're thinking like, man, that looks like that's really fun. They look so happy and they look so attractive, and like, why can't I have that? And it becomes this object you're searching for, and it's like, if only I could have that. And it's less about, I want someone to share my life with, or I want, a relationship, and more like I just want this thing to have that will look nice. Like
Right.
I want to have this girl to put my arm around, and be like, whoa, look at me, I have the girl. And, there are a lot of problems with thinking that. And I'd say now that I'm older, I mean, do those things factor in? Yeah, it is like most of my friends are married, and it is kind of like, wow, I would really like to have like a life partner to, at the end of the day, go home and talk to, stuff like that. But I'd say now a lot of the struggle is just like, you know, for lack of a better word, loneliness. Like it is just me most of the time, and our society isn't built in a way that makes it look good for someone to just be by themselves. Like you don't see people eating by themselves at a restaurant, and you don't really go to the movies by yourself. You don't, ride roller coasters by, like, you don't just do stuff by yourself. And so a lot of it is just like, man, it'd be nice to just have someone around and like share your life with and like talk to. And you have me, like I have guy friends, but we're not like, it's different. It's a little different. We're talking about like movies and stuff, not like, you know,
Yeah.
what makes you feel whole and complete in your feelings and stuff like that. So
Right. All right.
I don't know.
Well, thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of kids can relate to that, especially, at their age where, um, they're becoming older teenagers and dating is a thing, or all their friends seem to have a boyfriend, or, some girls start to feel lonely because their friends start spending more time with some
Right.
guy. So I think they totally relate to all those feelings that you're dealing with. What are some of the greatest lessons that you think you've learned through your singleness? You touched on that maybe a little bit when you talked about the book, but anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, there's a lot of like really specific lessons I've learned in being singleness, and a lot of it kind of comes back to just like your own personal growth. And I think it's healthy to, when I was younger, the temptation was, well, I'm single because this person didn't see me the right way, or this person didn't give me a chance, or, this person, that, or the other. And a lot of that is just like kind of blaming other people. And some of that might be true. Maybe someone just like didn't give you a fair shake. But I think the healthy response is to go, well, you know, what am I lacking? And like, can I do a better job of finding contentment in the situation I'm at right now
Mhm.
and working on that instead of just being like, well, man, girls are shallow and they just want the guys with muscles and hair or, whatever. And like, that's not healthy. That's just going to eat you alive. So, I mean, there's that stuff. And I think a lot of it comes back to something I have to always remind myself is there's this idea of whether it be relationships or like really any aspect of life, which is if I just have this one thing, then my life will be complete. And I think if I look at other areas of my life where I've thought that, like, man, if I just had this one specific job, or if I got this role in a play, or if I made this sports team, then my life would. And in all those other situations, that second part never happened. I never got the job that I wanted or the role I auditioned for or, the book I wrote. And it never is as like great or life fulfilling as you think it's going to be. And so I apply that to being single as well. Like, hey, Andrew, let's say you do find someone. Guess what? It's probably not going to be the thing that like radically changes your life and makes you feel whole and complete.
Mhm.
And it's this idea of we're constantly looking for something that's going to make us whole, when in reality we chase it, get it, and realize it was nice, but I mean, I still have all the same issues. It's like when you're a kid and you want that one present and you wait all winter for that one present and it's going to be the thing that changes your life. You open it, you're ecstatic, you play with it Christmas morning, and a week later it's in your closet.
Mhm.
And I think of it like that. If I put all of my eggs in this relationship basket, I might just end up being disappointed. And that's not fair to any woman that's out there and vice versa. Like that's not fair for anyone to be put on. And I think that's why a lot of relationships do fail, especially when you're young, is you think it's going to be this grand magical thing that's going to, you know, make you confident again and like, make you popular or whatever. And that's just not how life works. So,
Right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that because I think we make like these habits in our thought lives at a very young age, and a lot of times they can be super unhealthy. And so if you can learn in the particulars how to shift that thinking, like you're saying, I think like we're setting ourselves up in the long term in many different areas for greater success and even just
yeah.
our view of life as a whole.
Yeah, and that's the counterintuitive thing of that way of thinking, which is if you actually stop putting so much importance on the thing that you want, when you actually do get it, you can enjoy it more because your expectations are different. You can actually be more satisfied because you're treating it not as something that's going to fix everything, but just you're treating it for what it actually can provide. And
Mhm.
when you do that, you actually get more satisfaction from it. And so I think my goal right now is to think of relationships that way. So when the day does come that I'm no longer sad and lonely, you know, the day does come that, I'm in a relationship, I'm not going to treat it like this is the thing that's going to totally change my life and give me hair again and, and like fix everything. No, it's just like you treat it for what it actually can provide. And if
Yeah.
you look at it that way, you'll actually be more satisfied.
Because people can maybe almost like make relationships an idol, like
Right.
thing you're putting above all else. Yeah.
Yeah. And no one can live up to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All
Yeah.
you all you stud junior hires, I don't care how tan you are or how high of a score you can get on Modern Warfare, you're never gonna fully live up to that standard. So there you go.
Wise words.
Okay, so does your singleness help you more fully live out your purpose and your giftedness for the Lord? If your answer is yes, what does that look like for you? And if it is no, then in what ways do you feel like it restricts you?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would attribute my relationship status to any aspect of my relationship with God. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't think of it that way because I feel like if you're doing it right, it shouldn't matter what your relationship status is. Like your relationship with God isn't contingent upon any particular relationship with other people. It can help and it can be a huge aspect of it, but like neither one really guarantees you. Like being single or being in a relationship doesn't necessarily give you a head start one way or the other. It's just how you handle that. So you can be single and use all that free time you have part of a relationship, but you could also be in a relationship and then use your partner that you have as someone to lean on and encourage you, and that can be a different type of aid in your spiritual journey. So I think it's just more about like how you use it. And so that is the challenge for me is like, okay, I am single. Like I have a full-time job. I have friends, like I have hobbies, I have interests, like I have things eating away at my calendar, but I am relatively more free as a single guy than I am if, let's say, if I was married right now, like some of my married friends, like I just have more time than them. And the question is, well, how do you use that time? Do you use that time to better yourself? Do you use that time more to like grow spiritually, or do you use that time to just, continue to do selfish things and like, but that's the challenge no matter what your relationship status is. So I don't know.
Very cool. What are your views on dating? What are some things you think you've done right and some things that you think you could have learned from?
Oh man, I have so many dates to pull from, just so many different scenarios.
Hey,
I don't
you
even
told
know where to
me
begin.
stories when you were here. I remember some fun stories that you told
Sure.
when you were here.
Um, I think I talk about this in the book I wrote. I think one lesson I had to learn the hard way was this idea of like, just because I've been single for a long time and I put in all those miles of being single, like that doesn't mean I then deserve a relationship more than anyone else. And I think I had this subconscious belief of like, well, I've been single for so long and I've really put in the time, like, thus someone really should see how worthy I am of it. And that's just not how it works because no single relationship is ever about you. There's always two people involved, and like, so if you are in this spot where it's like, no, 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 like whatever person you're interested in, if you're thinking like I deserve to be with them, like you're off on the wrong foot. And I think not many people actually cognitively think that way, but I think subconsciously that is something that was in my brain of like man, like I this girl didn't actually like me the way I liked her, and she should have because I deserved it because like I did all the right things. I was nice, I was gentlemanly, and it's like, but that's just
Right.
not how it works. Like you can't control how someone else feels, and you can't let that affect you negatively. And like a lot of the times, like most of the experiences I've had with dating is like no one's ever been like extra rude to me or like out to get me. It just the feelings weren't aligned. Like it just we didn't see each other the same way, and that's not necessarily anyone's fault. And I know like there's the whole stigma of like the friend zone, like I was put in the friend zone. It's like, look, guys, there isn't like a meeting of the minds with like all females out there, and they all get on a Skype call and they're like going down the list of like guy names, going like, okay, let's go. Jerry, yeah, he's friend zone material. Let's all agree to friend. Like that's not. No one's getting together and like no girl's like cognitive like is like actually thinking about how to best put you in the friend zone. It's just that's just how relationships work out, and you have to accept that that's how it is. And if you don't have a healthy view of yourself in the first place, you're just asking for failure when inevitably you do get rejected. Because no matter how good looking you are, no matter how nice or funny or whatever, like not everyone is gonna like you like that. That's just how it is. So you just have to have a healthy self-understanding. And if you know you did everything quote unquote right, like you were polite, you were nice, you were, like gentlemanly, then just accept that you did the best you could, and that's not a reflection on like how gross or like undateable you are. That's just how it is. So that was an important lesson for me.
What do you think, like culturally, our cultural ideas about dating or definition of dating, do you think that our society has a good idea about that, or that maybe our students should think about doing things differently?
What do you mean how they
Dating
should do
isn't
things
really
differently?
the way we date, I guess, especially in American culture.
Okay.
The way we approach dating is not really like a biblical concept or anything.
Right.
Something that we've created on our own. So I'm just wondering if you think that the way our culture views it is healthy and good, or if there are like some other ways that you think our students should approach that.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some cultural problems with like any sort of relationships, and I would have to have like I'd have to be way smarter to really break that down. Um, but like there are definitely some like just subconscious stigmas. Like I think if you polled a bunch of people, I think there's a unconscious bias, which is if you're in a relationship, that's good, and if you're single, that's bad. And I think that just comes down to the way our society is structured, which is, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our society is structured in a very um, like you have to do everything in pairs or in groups, and nothing is really structured for isolation, or maybe not isolation is the right word, but like nothing's really structured for like that.
Individualism.
Yeah, so like I think on one end, our society is actually very individualistic, but we have these judgmental standards that like judges you for being like single, which is weird because like a lot of our country is set up in a way to make you separated from everyone else, like social media and like the way we are advertised to. It's like it's spoken very directly to you, like this will make you good, this will make you better, and like everything's individualistic. But then the society turns around on you and goes, okay, yeah, we're targeting you as an individual and like creating a society that isolates you from everyone else, but then we're going to judge you if you are isolated. So you're like, wait, what? Like, how is that fair? How is that fair to where the society is structured in a way to like make it all about you? Everything's about you, have it your way. But then if you actually happen to be single, everyone in society is going to judge you for that. It's like, well, if they're at a movie by themselves, they must smell bad, or they must not be fun to hang out with, or if they're eating at a restaurant, oh no, they couldn't find anyone. It's like none of that could be true. It's just maybe they just wanted to eat by themselves. And I think I think younger generations really can do a better job of like erasing those stigmas of like maybe speaking up for people, like, hey, like I know so and so, and they're not at that restaurant because they're smelly. It's just they just wanted to be by themselves for a bit, or I don't know. I don't know. I'm not nearly smart enough to break all that down, but
No,
I think it is interesting that our society speaks to us individually, but then shuns us for being individuals, which is I would need to think about that more to really break that down.
Yeah, that's a good point though, and I feel like it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about at the beginning. And I've heard and learned a lot in my experience of like the best thing to focus on when you're in a relationship with somebody is selflessness and how can I serve this other person. And if the two are both working at serving each other, then everyone will always be happy. And I think that applies to relationships beyond just romantic. Like I think that goes for work relationships or friendships or familial relations or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we are, like you were saying, set up in such a way where it's like, what can I get out of everything? And how can I be happy? How can I be satisfied? And then to have that mindset for all of these other areas of life, but then in relationships, which is one of the most important areas of your life, to then be trying to figure out how you can help the other person is like, how can you make such an extreme shift so drastically. So that's a good point of just it shouldn't always be about us. That was never the intention for God's intention for us anyway. It should be to love and serve Him and others, and so that should go into every area of our lives.
Yeah. Well said.
Like maybe not sharing embarrassing videos of our coworkers with everyone else we work with. That'd be a selfish thing to do.
I'm sorry. I'll show you later. Do you think it's wrong for a single person to desire to be in a romantic relationship, and why?
Okay. This is something that is kind of a pet peeve of mine. So if you've been napping throughout this whole thing, like, students, this is what I want you to hear. Okay. Yeah, you back there. Napping. Chris.
Talking and we don't know where it's coming from. Okay.
I see you, Chris, napping back there, having everyone else do your job. No. No, there is nothing wrong with wanting a relationship. And I think it's sad that both sides get like chastised for this. It's like single people sometimes get guilt over wanting a relationship, and people are like, well, like maybe you should just focus on yourself, which is a good thing, but like we are social beings. Like God designed us to be social, and if you think about it, like if God really is 3 in 1 and God is the creator of all things, then the very nature of everything ever created, the bedrock of life, which is God, is someone constantly in relationship. If God is 3 in 1, then God is a relational being. And thus we are relational beings. And that desire to be in relationship, whether that be a friendly relationship or a romantic one, is the most natural thing you can have. And wanting that isn't wrong. The way you want it can be wrong, like the expectations you put on it or the way you pursue it. Like if you treat someone like like a piece of meat, or you treat them like just something for their body, like that is wrong. But the desire itself isn't wrong. And the work is to figure out what your motivations are. And, it's like maybe you're at a spot where you want a relationship, but your parents don't want you to. Well, it's your job to respect that, but that doesn't mean you force yourself to get rid of that desire. Like you can't do that. It's normal. Your parents know that. They're not like asking you to become a monk. They're just telling you that at this point in time, you're probably not ready for all of the stuff that comes with that. And I know that's hard, like a hard pill to swallow, but that's just kind of how it is. You have plenty of time to date in the future, you know? And if worst comes to worst, you're 26 and single, well, look at me, right?
Yeah.
It's not the worst.
Author.
Right? See? Yeah, So you
Podcast.
just look at me, like, it's not the worst thing. I mean, you'll probably have hair at my age, so you'll have that too. But there's nothing wrong with that. And like, I think it's actually really healthy to go through all the highs and lows of that. Like, I think it actually is really healthy to be young and like someone, and whether they don't like you or you're not ready to date yet and you feel sad and you put on sad music and you're in your room on your bed, like being like, oh man, like this artist really gets me. Like, that's normal and that's good to experience that. Like, it's just healthy. That's part of being human. And so, I don't know if you're feeling really down about being single, or someone you got your heart broken, like that's just part of life. And when you're older and you look back on that, like you'll kind of look back on it with kind of like an affectionate stare, because like, that kind of, that's just what life is. That's just, I don't know. I basically what I'm saying is you can't force yourself not to desire that, and that's okay. And you just have to be patient and work on yourself and question your motives. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you're not wrong for wanting a relationship, because it's built into the very fabric of life itself. Like, that's just how it is.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks.
We appreciate it.
You're welcome.